asking question to Conclave. What are the different objectives served by different retailing formats in India? Because this is whole thing of high street, malls, standalone, mom and pop. There's a lot of jargon out there as far as retailing goes, and I'm sure each of them has a different objective. What, in your opinion, are these different formats serving in terms of objectives as retailing goes?
That's a very tough question to give an answer to.
You always start with a tough question in the morning to wake the panel and the audience up.
The truth is, retailing is just the art of selling a product to a consumer. I don't think all the jargon means the same thing.
Right.
Essentially, all retailing started out with mom and pop shops, right? Started out with some human being figuring he had a product that he wanted to sell to someone. Now, along the way, most of the Western formats, as markets start to mature, have started to get organized, because at some point, economies of scale had to kick in. Now, 12 years ago, when modern retailing started in India, grocery retail was about 2% organized. We're at about 17–18% organized today. In comparison, Australia is 98% organized. So which means that there's still a long way to go before we actually get there. Now, in countries like India, where parking is not necessarily thought of when planning cities or when permitting markets to open up within cities, automatically malls tend to become a very huge success, simply because they offer convenience to the consumer, something that was not available earlier. So even in Chennai is considered to be a very conservative city, but it was where modern retailing started in India, right? Whether it was Landmark, which was India's first bookshop chain, or Food World, which is now split into Food World and Spencer's, or Nilgiris, which are from Bangalore, but was in Chennai very early on. So, even though Chennai is considered to be the most conservative city, we have the first mall in India here. And then when it opened, nobody thought that Nugambakam High Road, which was the center of high street retail, would actually change or would die. Today, 13 years later, Nugambakam High Road has very few stores. There's been a new location with very high-end high street stores that is opened off Nugambakam High Road. But regular retail has moved into the malls. It moved years ago because people found that convenience. So eventually, I believe what will happen is you'll end up with convenience stores on high street. You'll end up with high-end retail stores on high streets. And anybody else who's dependent on volume in order to turn the right numbers is going to end up moving to the malls in India. Simply because they will offer lots of other conveniences to the consumer, and that because the city management is not going to change. Parking lots are not going to come up. So if you're dependent on volumes, then you'll end up starting to move slowly. So the convenience formats will continue to remain high street, luxury brands will remain high street, and the rest will move. Now, about 4 or 5 years back, people challenged that theory. They said, these large sari shops will never move. Tinagar will always remain as it were. Brookfields was the first mall to open with a sari shop as its anchor. And RMKD has since opened, I think, 3 more stores inside malls. And the sari stores are now moving into malls. It's just a question of breaking the mindset. GRT had never done a store in a mall. So they've done one now at Phoenix, and they're looking to start doing more mall stores, because one recognizes the convenience versus the cost.
So you're saying therefore that you're a strong votary and proponent of the fact that retail will eventually move to malls, despite the fact that there's a very high touch and feel component. I mean, the perception that Indian consumers believe that there has to be a very high personalized touch and feel. If we take the example of sari store, right? The general perception that Indian consumers love to have a one-on-one relationship with the person selling the product to them. Despite that perception that we have as consumers, you still believe that there is going to be this shift that will happen to malls that are largely considered impersonal.
Anil, I think the concept's getting mixed. Just because the store's in the mall doesn't mean there's a one-on-one relationship.
Right.
Now, our store at Spencer Plaza is 13 years old.
Right.
And I believe over 60% of the consumer coming to that store
Right.
knows the boys behind the counter by name and vice versa. The concept of having a one-on-one touch and feel is required whether you're in a high street or in a mall. That's that I would think is a fundamental pillar on which retailing exists. The ability to recognize a customer and make them feel special. Now, I now am part of a multiplex group, and we're constantly trying to evolve to figure out how we make every one of the 2 lakh consumers that walk into the main business every month feel recognized and special. Now, that doesn't have any relationship to whether you're in a mall or you're in a high street. I think the difference is really that the retailer has to make the mindset change. Because in a mall, predominantly, you can't buy the space, you have to take it on lease. The rentals are much higher. Therefore, you need to make that mindset change of, yes, I'm willing to pay this higher price and move into this space. I don't think the consumer doesn't have a problem. It's really the retailer who has to make the mindset change.
Right. Is that based on your experience in Japan, being retail across some